Alright, we are back for part 2 of the Punishment Sentencing, Chapter 9. Letting you enjoy a little bit more of Disturbed. Again, Down with the Sickness. We're day 6 on lockdown from the virus. Don't get down with the sickness. It's how ridiculous that sounds. But hey, here we are. That's where we are. Alright, let's get to it. So the second part of this is called sentencing models. And what this is actually doing is, this is taking those punishment philosophies we just talked about, the 5 punishment philosophies. But we're looking at it instead by the actual sentence that you're given and why you're given those sentences. There's an idea out there that when someone is sentenced to prison for 10 years, that they're going to serve 10 years. That's the idea that a lot of judges and a lot of people in the system want you to believe. It's just not true. Most states do what they call an indeterminate sentencing model. This is what Colorado does. And what we do is we give you a range in reference to your sentence. So you get caught doing a property crime, your range might be 2 to 6 years in prison. What that essentially means is, if you're a bad boy in prison, if you don't follow the rules, you're going to serve 6 years. But what it also means is, if you're a good prisoner, if you follow the rules, if you do what you're supposed to do, you're going to get 2 years in prison. And then you're going to get paroled. So an indeterminate sentence is based up on this range. So it's not an idea that, we're going to give you a sentence and you're going to serve every minute of that sentence. Indeterminate sentencing, which is what Colorado does, they always give you a range. Even on high profile violent crimes, there's always a range. It might be 25 to life, might be the range, but there's still a range. And why they do that is they're giving the defendant an opportunity to look at their sentence and say, okay, if I follow the rules and I do everything right, that there's still an opportunity I might get out of prison someday. Now, obviously, if it's a life sentence, you're given a life sentence. But even in an indeterminate system, we give them a glimmer of hope by saying life with the possibility of parole. That means after a certain amount of time, we might actually consider giving you parole, letting you get out, even on a life sentence. The only one that is truly not in Colorado an indeterminate sentence is when we still had the death penalty. Since we just weeks ago got rid of the death penalty, we do not have any kind of sentencing in Colorado that is considered not indeterminate. All of our sentencing is now indeterminate sentencing. The second is obviously determinate sentencing. And what they do on this one is, instead of giving you a range, they just give you a number. They give you one number. I think the way your book puts it, a fixed term such as 3 years. So, in the states that do determinate sentencing, they don't give you a range. They say you're sentenced to 3 years in prison, which means you'll do 3 years. Now, people like this because it's fixed. You do this crime, you get this amount. People who don't like this don't like it because there's no flexibility. Everybody that gets caught, convicted, and tried of the same thing, the judge then can give them a determinate sentence, whatever the number is. Now, it still can be different case by case. Determinate sentencing just means whatever the judge gives you as a sentence, you're going to do every minute of that. But it still means that, defendant A might get 2 years for that, Defendant B might get 4 years for that. Still going to have some flexibility in the sentencing, but determinate sentencing just says it's a fixed sentence when it's given to you, and you'll do every minute of that fixed sentence. The third sentencing model is what they call mandatory sentencing. This is one of those tough on crime sentences that they move forward and they go, okay, we're going to take away any discretion from the judge to give you any leeway in your sentence. And we're just going to flat say, your sentence, if you commit a theft, felony theft, you get convicted, your sentence is 4 years, period, mandatory. Everybody that does felony theft gets that sentence. No leeway, no thought of the case, no looking at your circumstances. You are mandatorily going to get that sentence. Takes away any discretion away from the judge. This is a way that states went when they wanted to prove they were getting tough on crime. So they would go after these people and say, we're not going to allow you any kind of flexibility or leeway in the sentence. We're going to give you mandatory. The last one that came about in that tough on crime era also was what they call truth in sentencing. What this comes around to be is, instead of, again, giving you a range, instead of saying it was mandatory, they could give you a sentence, and they would maybe give you a range. But they would say the truth is, no matter what, we're going to make sure you serve 5 years for this offense. Now, you could serve up to 10. But in truth, we're going to guarantee everybody that you will do 5. And they did it that way so that people weren't fooled by this range. They kind of told you the range is 5 to 10. We're going to guarantee that you'll do 5. And, they liked this because they thought it was truthful then. Nobody was being fooled into thinking you were going to do 5. And then they were going to let you out early for good time. You'll do every minute of 5, is what they're telling you. Those are the main sentencing models. Indeterminate, determinate, mandatory, and then truth in sentencing. Another trick they always like to do when sentencing people is they like to do a thing called whether or not your sentence on multiple charges are concurrent or consecutive. They like to try to make themselves look tough on crime, they being judges. And let's say you got caught for 4 burglaries. They're going to sentence you, they say, to 2 years for each burglary. Most of us look at that and think, okay, well, they're going to serve 8 years. 4 burglaries, 2 years apiece, that's 8 years. Depends on whether or not they say it's going to be consecutive or concurrent. If they say, well, we're going to be tough on this guy, you get 2 years for each burglary. But then they quietly go, to be served concurrently. That means all of your 2-year sentences are served at the same time. You essentially have only been sentenced to 2 years because you're serving it concurrently. The only way you serve 8 on those 4 burglaries, 2 years apiece, is if they say you're serving it consecutive, which means you serve one sentence of 2 years. The minute you're going to get out, you start the second sentence of 2 years, and so on and so forth. That's a consecutive sentence. Very rarely do they do consecutive, unless you are just a super bad guy. Then they'll do something silly like, we're going to sentence you to 162 life sentences to be served consecutive. So that means that's what one of the Oklahoma city bombers got. So we're going to wait till you serve one life sentence, start over, serve a second. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. They do that to make a point that you're never, ever, ever getting out of prison. The last area in this chapter that they want to spend some time on is on capital punishment. Like I just mentioned a minute ago, we just did away with Colorado's capital punishment. The book likes to list pros and cons. They're all bullshit. Don't buy off on either any of those being pros and cons. Capital punishment was in place as the ultimate punishment for the ultimate bad guys that did such horrific crimes. As society, we said, we want to guarantee that they'll never get out and never commit another crime. And the reason, and we want to get retribution going because they're mass murderers or they're serial killers or they blew up a building and killed 100 people. And we want to make sure that they don't get out and ever have a chance of doing anything bad again. And so we said the ultimate punishment for that was capital punishment, the death penalty. Some people like it, some people don't. The pros and cons in the book are nonsense. The reason to do it is because you're a person who believes that those kind of horrific crimes by those horrific criminals deserves one punishment, and that's death. Some people believe that, some people don't. My one thing, if you say I believe in that, is would you be willing to flip the switch? If you're going to say I believe in the state of Colorado, or whatever state, killing bad guys for their crimes, I would think that you have to be honest and say, and therefore I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to flip that switch. I'm willing to hold them accountable to the point where let's kill them as a society. If you're not for it, then you should just be honest and say, I don't believe the state or the government should be in the business of killing people as a punishment. Either one of those are appropriate excuse me, opinions to have. Don't try to convince other people. It's moral to not do it. It's moral to do it. It's more expensive. It's less expensive. It's not a deterrent. It's a deterrent. None of that matters. We have capital punishment for the ultimate punishment of retribution for the ultimate crimes. If you don't agree with it, be honest. Say, I don't agree with it for whatever your personal reasons are. And if you do agree with it, say you do agree with it for those reasons. Don't try to convince broad members of society with these nonsensical explanations. They're not legitimate pros and cons. All right, remember, you've got an assignment due Sunday. You've got a discussion post. You need a first original post before Wednesday, and then 2 additional posts before Sunday. Enjoy. Email me if you have any questions.